This is a question that I believe relates to students, and I suppose those with the need to write as a whole. What is, objectively, the better writing utensil? Is it the wooden pencil, that rod containing the cylindrical bounty that is its lead interior? The pen, that writing device of antiquity, repurposed for the present day? Or is it the mechanical pencil, a modern take on the pencil, which carries with it the means of replenishing itself of its lead sustenance? Let us consider the pros and cons of each device as we move forward, starting with their intrinsic qualities, while not taking into account their competition. In appreciation, both for its simple name and for its resemblance to its cousin, used throughout history, let's start with the pen. For the most part, pens as we know them today began their lives as GB patent number 15630, issued by John J. Loud in October of 1888. There were others similar to it, but this is the first patent to truly resemble the ballpoint seen on most pens now commonplace in stores across the world. These pens are able to store and refill ink in an efficient manner, and thus are great for someone who wants to reuse a pen by simply adding more ink to it. As pens have a lifespan solely dependent on quality and the care given to it by its owner, theoretically the same pen can be used for years, giving it the means to attain sentimental value, and, perhaps if the pen is expensive, value as a symbol of wealth. However, this reliance on ink, which although giving what is written down great resolution, typically comes at the cost of being unable to remove what has been written without covering it up, thus bringing about a reliance on other tools to cover up mistakes. However, otherwise, any other standalone issues are not that important, and so let's move on to discussing the standalone qualities of pencils. Pencils started out as sticks of hardened graphite, held together by wrapping some fabric around it, and really started coming together around 1560, when Simonio and Lindiana Bernicati, an Italian couple, started surrounding this graphite with wood, although this was more of a proof of concept than anything else. The eraser aspect of a pencil gained a patent in 1858 by none other than Hyman Lipman. Before I stop talking about this, let me just say to go take a look at the Notable Pencil Users section on Wikipedia. I got distracted and spent hours reading about the books these authors have written. These people were all very influential writers and inventors. Anyways, back to the pencil itself. The pencil has a very intuitive design. It's fairly straightforward as to its application, although I suppose it could look a little odd if it is still unsharpened. Pencils also make it very obvious when they need replaced, which is nice in a sense, although this does come at the cost of the pencil quite literally shrinking in size, perhaps compounding issues with how the utensil is held, until it is eventually thrown to the curb in its stub-like state. The eraser is great, as there typically are no issues removing mistakes, which, if standards are present, will inevitably materialize at some point. However, with me saying that, I do need to say that in my case, erasers essentially always break off or are worn away before the pencil is rendered useless, thus leading me to either wipe at any mistakes in futility, let mistakes fester over what I am writing, or grab something else to remove the mistake, all options which give me a sense of melancholy towards the utilitarian option once afforded to me. Finally, there is the duality between sharpness and dullness. You have the option to make each and every one of your pencils needle sharp, which perhaps even makes them viable self-defense weapons in the minds of some, in conjunction with their smooth writing ability. However, this is typically not how things turn out. Although it may be dependent on the quality of pencil, pencil sharpener, or knife, if a sharpener isn't available, what typically happens, in my case while in class, is that I'll go up to sharpen my pencil, feel that I have it good, pull it out, and find a pencil whose lead has fallen out into the inner machinations of the pencil sharpener lying before me. I try again, and soon enough, with luck and perhaps after a few attempts, I eventually get a pencil which is good enough, maybe sharp, but typically not Chow Li, as described above. I think that's enough about the pencil, and before we cast any judgment on it, we need to discuss the final contender in this three-way engagement, the mechanical pencil. The mechanical pencil had its first patent similar to how we see it today in 1822 by John Isaac Hawkins, and in particular Samson Mordaunt, who alone went ahead and started selling these pencils. Today, these pencils are all over the place, and for good reason. They have the same intuitive design as the pencil, and instead of needing to be sharpened, you can simply control how much of a long, thin, and most importantly sharp, sliver of lead you want to write with, simply extending it when you run low. These pacers typically have an eraser at the end as well. Thus, once again, those mistakes can be easily removed so long as this eraser remains intact. These characteristics alone give this writing utensil a great edge, and although they typically don't last too long depending on the graphite used, they can be refilled similar to that of pens, thus once again allowing them to last for as long as the consequences of hedonistic misuse will allow. Mechanical pencils do break easily, however, this becoming more prevalent as the length of the lead extending from the mechanical pencil's tip increases. Although this is less of an immediate issue with inconvenience, as it's easy enough to extend more lead out, it easily can bite off a significant amount of time off its lifespan. Overall, mechanical pencils easily find themselves as a fine contender in this lineup. A lineup which will now come ballpoint to dull point to plastic tip, as we compare their pros and cons in comparison to one another. Pens, pencils, and mechanical pencils. All three of these are viable means of expression. Don't get me wrong, but which is better? Let's come to this ultimately arbitrary conclusion by comparing each utensil's means of satisfying 5 functional aspects of their use. These 5 aspects are expendability, the literal or figurative cost of one of these utensils losing functionality versus the cost of getting more. Longevity, how long the utensil will last taking into account maintenance. Clarity, the quality and consistency of writing. Maintenance, the ease of carrying out some form of upkeep. And finally, universality, the ability of the pencil, mechanical or otherwise, or pen, to adapt to different writing surfaces or purposes. I could very well add more criteria, but I feel this is good enough as is. I could add a historical significance rating as well, and although I do like to push back against postmodernist precedents whenever I can, I don't think it is too important when talking functionality. Anyways, let's just go in the order of introduction and start with expendability. To begin with expendability, it's fair to say that pencils immediately appear to have a great advantage here, simply due to their cheap and bountiful nature as a staple commodity. However, we should still take a look and see if some aspect of pens or mechanical pencils could perhaps overpower the strong foothold pencils currently have over this aspect. Mechanical pencils and pens can both be bought cheaply, sure, but this comes at the cost of both an inconsistent level of quality compared to the fairly standard quality present in pencils, simply due to their simplicity, and also no significant improvement to lifespan outside of spending money on additional venues to increase the length of their otherwise relatively mediocre use to society. Due to this alone, I give pencils expendability. The next empirical quality up for debate is the longevity of each device. Remember, this is including the application of sustenance that sees fit to extend each technology's lifespan. With that, it's safe to say that pencils have already lost this one, simply due to the fact that, as an individual, it is destined at some point in the future to find itself reconstructed into a small pile of paper-thin wood scraps, simply due to the manner in which it functions. Pens and mechanical pencils are more complicated, since they can, theoretically, in a dramatized sense, be renewed ad infinitum. I took a look to see whether or not ink or graphite globally is more likely to run out to determine who should win, but it seems that there is so much of both resource that the probability of either running out seems unlikely. There is, however, the prospect of what happens if a pen or mechanical pencil is not used for a long time. And, as I'm sure many of you have experienced, most pens will eventually dry up and be rendered usable only to the most committed. With that, I give longevity to the mechanical pencils. The third quality our three contenders find themselves confronted by is clarity. Pencils have the potential for high resolution when writing, but this quickly degrades before it needs sharpened again. This is not an issue with pens or mechanical pencils. However, pens will eventually dry up and lead to a situation where, if one doesn't want to, or doesn't have the means to, replace the ink, then they will continue to settle for a gradually degrading writing experience, as the ink slowly causes the writing to fade out. Mechanical pencils will remain sharp for the entirety of their lives, and so I feel it is appropriate they are awarded this aspect. Let me speed this up. I'm aware that this is getting dragged out a bit longer than necessary. Next is ease of maintenance. Pens can leave you an inky mess without much warning, and so I don't feel they should be given this. However, the relationship between mechanical pencils and pencils is more complicated, as while pencils have ease of maintenance through tools, it can become problematic to do so without these. At the same time, mechanical pencils, while not requiring as much effort, require you to go out and buy lead to be able to replace it. However, since this only takes place at the point where a normal pencil will have been rendered useless as a writing utensil, I feel mechanical pencils have won this. Since mechanical pencils have earned 3 of the 5 already, there's no point in spending any more time on universality, as mechanical pencils have already won. I need to admit that I'm impartial towards mechanical pencils, as prior to using them to study I would use pens, which even among the higher quality brands would dry up quite quickly. However, I do feel I was fair in these rankings, although if not a bit judgmental to pens. Regardless of how I feel, if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. Anyways, I'm letting this ramble drag on for far longer than I should have. It ultimately isn't too important what you use, as all of them have their ups and downs. This is just my opinion. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed listening to this long ramble, despite how generic it sounds, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If not, you are free to point out any problems you have with this video in the comments. Have a great day.